to DT Podcast. I'm Kate.
And I'm Elle.
And I'm so fucking excited because we have 1,000 followers on Instagram. Actually, like 1,030.
Nice.
I know. Hold on.
All the things.
Put your hat on.
Did you put it under your chin?
No.
What a nick.
How embarrassing. We are so excited. I know that there are people out there that have literal millions of people following and downloading and whatever, but every single time we have someone listen or like or comment or whatever, I'm shocked.
This is a big deal for us.
Yeah, because
Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring.
Yeah, we started doing this fully expecting like no one's ever going to listen. And that's okay because we were talking about books anyway. So we were like, why not just do it in front of a mic?
Yeah.
So yeah, people actually listening. I mean, one of my biggest fears other than like sitting on a needle in a movie theater is
what?
Failure. So it is very meaningful and just unexpected and amazing that people are actually listening and enjoying. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you guys.
We can.
Okay. Yeah, that knocked it off already. I'm too demonstrative when I talk and move.
Well, if we had it under our chins, you know.
My cheeks aren't ready for that. Sorry.
But today we're going to be talking about House of Flame and Shadow chapters 31 through 37. And we're going to answer another question that we got from a listener. And I've really been enjoying this kind of Q&A back and forth thing that we've been doing. So if you have any questions or hot takes or just something you think it would be funny for us to talk about, you can message me on Instagram at DTFA Podcast or our email, which is how we received today's question, dtfapodcast@gmail.com. And before we find out whatever the fuck Ithan is doing at the House of Flame and Shadow, Elle has our book rec this week.
Me. And I talked about this book maybe like a week or two ago whenever I was starting it. It's the series called Fallen Fae Gods by Jaymin Eve. It's Jaymin, Jaymin Eve. The second book was actually just released on Friday, so it's perfect timing.
Perfect timing.
I hate recommending and reading books that aren't completed yet, so I started this one not knowing that it was a new series, but it's a fun book. It's a fun read. There's good smut. I wouldn't say there's really great writing, but the world building gets better and more interesting as the book goes along.
Well, sometimes you want to we've talked about our little smutty palette cleansers, and they have an important role to play when we're like between these series.
Not super long. It's like 200 or 300 pages. So like it's a fun weekend read. The first book is called Gilded Wings, and it's a series set in present day where our main character is human. She doesn't know there's a magical world out there, and it focuses on fae and dragon shifters.
Fairy. Excuse me.
Fae and dragon shifters. So our main character, Morgan, is a librarian. Oops.
I love that. She's like a librarian working with her BFF, which is kind of my dream job.
Yes, they work in a private library. The whole thing is kind of weird, and it's weird that she's like, whatever, it's what I do, because like she
doesn't ask questions.
Yeah, they don't really have people come in to check out books because it's a private library. But overnight, when they're not there, people check out books.
So she comes in the next morning, and
they have to sort through
missing.
these books. And I'm like, you don't even know who checked it out. You don't know anything about it. You know that some of them are like really important, secure books. Is somebody there overnight you don't know about if you're the librarian?
Well, that's why we would be in trouble in so many books because we asked too many questions, and like why we'd be on the wall in Handmaid's Tale because we have a lot of opinions.
Look, if somebody F's something up when I'm not there, if I'm the librarian, am I going to get in trouble? I'm not here to oversee what you're doing. So it's a little bit of a slow start because we have to build her backstory and learn about who she is. But the main thing is that she really enjoys working at the library. And then there's one night she and her friend go out and drink too much. And she gets a call from the owner of the library that somebody stole a book. And she's like, whoa. I remember putting that up. They didn't steal it. And the guy's like, yeah, okay, whatever. But so like she kind of internalizes it. And she's like, I need to go check on that. So they're never at the library at night. Now she's going to go there at night when people
library after dark.
Yeah. Well, because like you don't know who's there. People are checking out books and you've never seen it. And now she's suddenly going to go. Naturally, she stumbles into this world of fae. There's a bunch of fae that are there. And
so are the fae, can they not be out in daylight? Or they're just hiding? They're like in
It's not that. There's a significance to the library itself for them.
Okay.
So they can walk around the world. It's not that. But they're intentionally at the library for a specific reason. And then while she's there, they have this like fertility ritual that starts every year for 30 fucking days.
Does she just happen to be there when it
Yeah,
starts?
she happens to get locked into it. Hate that for you.
Hate that for
So
her.
it goes from this like intro to her to suddenly she's having sex with a dragon shifter for like a whole month straight. I'm like, okay.
Dragon shifters and fae.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So like it's good smut, but it's also like she describes he has a dragon dick. He's not shifted.
Mm-hmm.
He just like
it's just his dick.
Yeah, he has a ridge. No, not like an animal dick. It's just like he has ridges on the side, I guess, for her pleasure, and he's huge. Mm-hmm. So he has to use his.
That sounds better in theory.
Well, he literally has to use his magic to adjust her insides so she can
adjust
take him.
Her insides and not just make himself.
Yeah. It's not just like turning her on; it's like adjusting so she can fit him. And I'm like, this feels weird.
So is he stretching me out? Because then it's going to be like throwing a hot dog down a hallway for anybody.
Not when it's like a massive dick. Like I don't know. It's like.
And then there's also nodding, right?
It's interesting, but it's also kind of like I can't tell if it's an ick. I'm like every time, but like.
Well, it's one of those that in this, I don't know, within a realm of a fantasy romance book, it's kind of hot.
Honestly, when things are weird, I just go with it. I'm like, it's fine. It's not human.
Well, yeah.
Explain it to me.
There's nodding in that book, and there's nodding in the book that I talked about last week, Bride, because nodding is kind of having a moment right now, and people are discovering what it means.
So the first time they have sex, his dick also knots, and it like basically does something to lock into place.
That's terrifying.
I don't know. It's wild, but it means something with her.
But what do you do while it's knotted in there?
I mean,
because he can't.
They're both still orgasming, so it's okay.
I guess
it's not like they're just like laying there like this is fine.
Just looking at each other.
Can you release me now? But it's like, so she kind of kicks things off with this guy, and it's interesting. Some of it's a little on the nose because the library itself is called Dragerfield Library.
Okay.
The main guy's name is Drager, and he's a dragon shifter.
Yeah.
Like, really?
It's kind of like Dark Fae, like Fatalion.
Yeah.
Instead of Italian.
A lot of like really obvious things. But it's weird because he's a dragon shifter, but he's not Fae. Mm-hmm. The Fae kind of treat him like he's a god. It's a weird setup. Like he and 4 of his brothers, so there's 5 of them.
Ooh, reverse harem?
Maybe.
Maybe.
They like fell to the Fae world and like, I guess, took it out of chaos, so they're all in charge. So they're treated like gods, but they're not actually gods. They're just aliens from another world, another planet. But since it's only been 1 book, I think she is setting up a reverse harem that I'm very excited about because one of the other dragons meets our main character and he's like, hey, mine. Mm-hmm. So it's a fun read. I'm excited to read the second one, see where this is going.
Well, it reminds me, like 2 nights ago, we watched Damsel on Netflix and it had dragons. And if anybody is wondering if they should watch it, I feel like it was like it was fun, I guess. It wasn't great. The story wasn't great. I didn't love.
It's very pretty.
It's very pretty.
It was a very good like fairy tale setting, but there were some plot holes.
Yeah,
that didn't make the most sense, or the main character kind of gets on your nerves because she makes
terrible as she screams the whole time,
hiding from a dragon.
The dragon is using like hearing to hunt her, and she just screams and grunts, and there's so many sounds.
So it is something different. I wouldn't say it's great, but it's
like fine background.
Yeah, background. It's pretty.
It is very pretty. It's like it kind of has a filter on it the entire time.
Yeah, so that's fun.
But yeah, it's like the dragon changes sizes a couple times. The dragon's kind of ugly.
It just, there's a few things that, again, plot holes. We could go into it. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. But. So yeah, if you're wondering if you should watch Damsel, like whatever. Sure.
That's the new Millie Bobby Brown movie that's
on Netflix.
Or Netflix. Say Instagram, not Instagram, Netflix.
So chapter 30 ended with Ithan being greeted at the House of Flame and Shadow by none other than Jesiba Roga.
Ooh, I'm glad she's back.
I was so happy to see her name. I mean, I still wonder about Fury, but other than Fury, Jesiba was my number 1. What the fuck is she doing?
Well, we had so many big questions about her, and she seems to be a really big character, a big player. So, like, where is she?
Yeah.
In case you've forgotten, since she's been MIA in this book, we first met Jesiba in House of Earth and Blood as Bryce's boss at Griffin Antiquities. We didn't know much about her, just that she defected from the witches at some point. She's now in the House of Flame and Shadow, and it was revealed that she's the keeper of the Library of Parthos.
which was destroyed 15,000 years ago because it contained books on evolution, mathematics, and theories to disprove the superiority of Vanir and the Asteri. So obviously they wanted that gone. But there were also some books that we recognized from other books, like the Book of Breathings from Akatar and The Walking Dead from Throne of Glass. And she saved them at the end, and we don't really know why or where they are now, or why she was why they were ever under her care. But we're gonna find out.
We never knew exactly why or how she had the amulets the priestesses of Parthos wore either, until now.
I do like how this lore dump was handled more than Celine's.
Well, it felt more natural because it flowed more like a story because she's telling her own history without telling a bunch of excess information.
And it kind of it did give Ithan a storyline that I gave a shit about, because at the end of the meat market, I couldn't deal with that anymore. So even if his involvement in this is pretty random, it at least gave me a reason to not dread Ithan chapters.
Yeah, well, because it's not about Ithan, it's about the people with him. I'm like, what are they doing? The House of Flame and Shadow's headquarters also sound like a sexy private club.
I think we talked about this last week, but it reminds me of Queen of the Damned when she's walking in the vampire club and she's very like
she's like dancing through the water as she walks.
And then she's using her hands to like light people on fire.
Yeah,
it sounds like the coolest house.
Yeah, it does sound very sexy and dark.
Very. I think we said this last week. Ithan has never been to Lunathian's House of Earth and Blood headquarters, or the main headquarters, which are in Helene. It's a city we don't know that much about, other than it's a 3 days drive. It has a sunball team, which obviously is what he cares about. And it's ruled by lion shifters, which is really interesting. And I'd like to learn a little bit more about them, because I don't think we've met any lion shifters.
Except for the one she hooks up with at the club. But
and Helene itself, like the name is so similar to Celine, so maybe it was named after her.
Well, like maybe her sister Helena. It was like a tribute to both of them.
Yeah,
it sounds kind of like a combination of their names. Yeah,
that's a good point.
And it's the place Bryce and her mom needed Randall's help getting to when they were running from the Autumn King's goons.
When they got there, Ember was deemed a vessel for Chthona, and then Randall a vessel for Solus. And I guess that was because they witnessed Bryce's starborn power, but we've also speculated there being more to Ember. And I don't know if that's another example of us overthinking.
Or is it just because Chthona is like the mother and she was pregnant?
Yeah, I guess if they saw...
Oh, no, she wasn't pregnant. Sorry. How old? Yeah, she was.
Bryce was a kid. Bryce was there because she uses her starborn powers to blind them.
Yeah, I just lost the plot on the timeline with that one. Okay. Anyway,
so I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the deal is with the Chthona and Solus vessel part.
I mean, again, it could just be because she's a mother, not because she's currently pregnant, but because she's a mother. But anyway, back to Jesiba and Ithan. Ithan tells Jesiba that he needs a necromancer.
He kind of demands it. Like, a lot of the characters in this book are really entitled.
But like, who are you, sir, that you walk in and you're like,
I need a necromancer. First of all, he's walked into a wall. He's embarrassed himself immediately. And then he walks in with demands, had nothing. He can't, I mean, I know he has some money, but it's not like he can actually pay for a necromancer.
But again, like, who do you think you are? You're just a foot soldier. You're not even like an alpha.
And we know that Jesiba has this, like, I don't know, love, I guess, for Bryce. She cares about Bryce. Ithan is fucking no one to her.
She also loves to turn people into like little bitty creatures. So just dial it down, Ithan.
Ithan could do it like a little bit of time as a worm.
I mean,
just to learn some humility.
But I mean, he's in luck because she does need a new assistant. And it's not for Connor, like Jesiba guesses, but this need for a necromancer is for Sigrid, the lost and now headless Fendir heir.
I definitely had not considered bringing her back as an option because of the whole like hereditary scene. But I guess because other books we've read that have necromancy, you can't do it once someone's head has been removed.
Things are not going to go back the way you think they will.
So I was interested in how that played out, and it was horrifying.
Also just weird that like Ithan has his head in the sand. Like, it's very clear that you need to be in charge. And he's like, nope, let's go with somebody that's headless and dead. I can't deal with this.
He goes right up to the point and then misses it entirely. And Jesiba even, because he's like, I made a huge mistake. And she's like, did you?
It's very like Aelin though, or I guess Selena back and throw in a glass where
like accepting who you are.
You know this is the mantle you have to take on, and you just don't want to admit to it yet. You know, like
it could be Bryce too, with her needing to lead the Fae.
Yeah.
But generalizing all the Fae as being bad.
Yeah. Stop making excuses. It's time.
Mm-hmm.
Over in Five Roses, Bryce asks the Autumn King about his orrery, and he tells her it's his life's work to investigate why the Fae bloodlines have been weakening for generations.
And that's a question Bryce knows the answer to. That's got to be infuriating to him. Not only are they unknowingly paying the tithe to feed the Asteri, but the water is contaminated with this parasite, which is the parasite is like in my list with Magic Bean and Hologram, to where I'm like, okay. They didn't have 15,000 years ago. It's not like they had a lot of technology, but they developed, I don't know. Anyway, it's just kind of one of those,
Well, parasites die. You know, it seems like it's like a spell. It's a little bigger than a parasite.
Yeah.
The way they describe it is interesting.
But even if they, they drink the water, and even if they don't do the drop, their power is going to fade away. So they're kind of fucked either way.
Yeah.
But I had hopes that the Autumn King was doing all this research and all this work just for the good of Fae kind, I guess. But it becomes pretty clear in this conversation that it's more ego-driven than anything for him and for King Morven.
Yeah. I know you really wanted a redemption arc from
I
him.
really did. It's just my daddy issues, I guess.
Well, and we discussed this last week, but she kind of makes him a lot more one-dimensional in this scene, or like this little grouping of scenes.
He was a very dynamic and interesting character in the first two books. Like, he's morally gray, but he has layers.
Yeah.
To where it might be it's definitely he's taking care of himself first.
Yeah.
But then I do think he cares at least a little bit about Bryce and Ruhn and about Fae
too.
Yeah. There's just like, we get little glimpses of it, and then you lose it.
Yeah.
So
the topic then turns to the Avalon mists, which the Autumn King isn't sure if the Asteri have ever tried to pierce. She asks if thin places, something she learned about in Prythian, mean anything to him, but it doesn't.
But it's so specific. Like, she asked, does thin places mean anything to you? And he's like, no.
It's specific.
And then she's like, okay, no reason.
I mean, but like the word thin is just kind of vague. So it's like specific, but it's also like, what do you mean?
You know, he immediately wrote it down in his little notebook and was like, thin places.
Investigate.
Google. Bryce asks her father what it is he wants from her. And even if he says he's locking her up to keep her safe and hidden from the Asteri, we know there's more to it, but I do think that's at least part of it. Or maybe I just I'm hoping.
Nothing about his current motives feel like love, though. So it still doesn't feel like enough of an answer. He adjusts a prism-like device that sends sunlight through the orrery, showing the planets.
And I have to be honest, this was kind of like Hypaxia in Synth for me when she was explaining the antidote. My eyes kind of glaze over when it was talking about the light and condensing it and fracturing it. It didn't feel like new information for us. I know later on she learned something about her light by directing it through the prism, but in this moment I was just like, this is siphons, right? This is just exactly what they use in Prythian.
I think because it wasn't specific enough about how she can utilize this information. So it's like, okay, neat. I'm not going to remember this in 5 minutes when we talk about it again.
Yeah, exactly.
So like, tell me what this means. He definitely wants to weaponize light. He just doesn't know how.
And he doesn't know the power that Bryce inherited in Prythian. So she's like, she is living his dreams.
I mean, like, just another thing though, like, I'd have been like, don't you want to take these shackles off so you can see what I can do now?
Oh yeah, she does have the shackles on.
Yeah, because I would want to show him just to like rub it in his face.
Yeah.
Bryce correctly guesses the Autumn King's research comes down to killing the Asteri, something he's obviously wondering if Bryce is capable of, but he's also playing both sides.
Bryce does end up telling him about the Asteri, that they feed on the light, the drop, the water, everything. So the Autumn King finally has answers to why the Fae's power is weakening generation after generation. But is that not information she told Az and Nesta she would never share?
Yeah, I'm not telling anybody except for like literally everybody. She said she's not going to tell the Asteri, but we don't trust him, remember?
No, I don't trust him.
But also, if this has been his life's work, how long have you been alive, sir, and you haven't figured any of this out?
I know. How embarrassing.
Bryce tries to get more info about the Star Sword and Truth Teller.
Because we don't actually know if they would have worked, if they would have killed Vesperus under different circumstances, because, Nesta had to use ataraxia on him.
Well,
so we never got, she didn't get to like play around with it.
Yeah, well, it's in that prophecy that they're supposed to be united.
But has she tried just smashing them together?
Why because she brought them both into Vesperus and it wasn't enough. So like there's clearly something she's missing.
She went very literal in that, where she was like just stabbed both of them at the same time. It was like, okay.
That makes me think of is it Lord of the Rings? Yeah, where Gandalf in the first one, like, you shall not pass, and he like in the blast of power with his
except
like,
nothing happens.
Good effort. Nice try.
He has more info on the sword and dagger because he studied the lore at the Avalan archives, which are apparently even more extensive than what the Autumn King and Jesiba have.
But so that's only for men.
But it's only for men.
So it's weird because Ruhn, being the Starborn, should definitely have also studied there and gotten this information.
He went there and was like, boring.
I hate it here, Dad.
Yeah, he like went into the cave and was attacked by his cousins who have been renamed in this book. Excuse me. I had to look it up, and it's definitely a continuity error or something, because they have different names. But I don't think he explored the island much.
Yeah, I don't think.
But it made me think about, when they talk about the archives, that Bryce still has a job at the archives. Like, is she still getting a paycheck, or that owl every single day has to find somebody to cover for her?
I mean, it depends if she's going to be salaried or if she's hourly wage, I guess. Well, it's only been a week, right?
You're right. It's been
less than
7 days,
5 days.
And she and Ithan have these huge gaps in their resumes. Like, it'll be Ethan's going to be just nothing assistant 2 days, nothing.
Like, what are your qualifications? LinkedIn. Yeah.
But before they can have a productive conversation about achieving the mutually beneficial goal of killing the Asteri, they once again stop communicating.
I mean, it's just like Prythian. Does Bryce have a reason to trust her father? No. Does she have reasons to trust Nessa and Az? No. But this lack of communication is hurting everybody.
Right. Like, someone is just going to have to say fuck it and be the bigger person, because we're wasting time.
I mean, every second that you're walking away, huffing and puffing and being a little bitch, your brother and your mate are being tortured.
Yeah. And she is huffing and puffing. They both are. She's like they take turns. Sometimes she'll be like, I'm done. And she goes away. And then sometimes he's like, I'm done. And he goes in his study. And it's like, they are very alike, actually.
Well, I mean, I can understand wanting to push his buttons because he deserves it. But again, bigger priorities here.
Exactly. Like, you wasted 5 days, and not wasted, but you were in Prythian for 5 days. But it's already been 2 days.
Yeah. Like, just, we don't have any more time to waste, especially since you're back.
Yeah, exactly.
Back in the Eternal City, Mordock and several Dreadwolves enter the dungeons to retrieve Hunt, Ruhn, and Baxian for Rigelus.
They're in bad shape, especially Ruhn, but at least Hunt and Baxian's wings have regrown, and they were itchy the entire time.
Oh, I'm sure.
But that's thanks to the first light that Lidia provided. Once again, Lidia, saving the day. And last episode, we talked about Adis's conversation with Hunt, where it was revealed that Rigelus had chosen Ruhn to die. So Hunt is assuming that's what is about to happen.
I mean, Ruhn is assuming it too. Oh, it's so brutal. I mean, but
and
also,
he kind of accepted, like, he's just kind of like, bye. Or it was like, nice knowing you, Hunt, something.
Well, and I mean, the guys have their wings back, but they have to be so weak. They probably can't even, like, barely walk and carry them. That would be so heavy. Ruhn, who's being dragged along by 2 guards to an elevator, which then opens to reveal Lidia.
And Lydia's arm is in a sling, thanks to burns we know that she asked the MIA Sprite Queen to give her. Ruhn, Baxian, and Hunt get in the elevator, and Lidia is like, there's only room for 2 more. And she orders Mordock to take the stairs. And he's just like stomping up like stupid deer.
So pissy.
Because, I mean, we'll see later on, there's been resentment, obviously, building up in these wolves for having to not only follow a deer,
well, they're the
but
predators.
A female.
Yeah, there's multiple things there, but I imagine that being a predator, following what would normally be your prey would be difficult. As the elevator ascends, Hunt tells the hawk, fuck you, and Lidia says, I can't have said it better myself, as she pulls out her gun and shoots the hawk right between the eyes.
We switch POVs to Ruhn, and he's watching as Lidia shoots the hawk, and then he shoots the 2 Dreadwolves. It's just her and the dungeon daddies, and Baxian is just open mouth like, what the fuck?
I God, he doesn't know.
No idea. He's the only one that doesn't know the backstory about the Hind being Agent Day.
I mean, Ruhn could have mentioned it while they're just hanging there.
Well, they were still scared that like he would be tortured and maybe say something, I guess. I don't think that Baxian would. But it reminded me of when we first met Baxian and Hunt was being shitty about Lidia. It was Baxian who was like not really taking up for her, but he was kind of like, she's not as bad.
You don't know all that she's been through.
Exactly, because he's seen how Pollux has treated her. So he's surprised, but
I guess he didn't realize it was that bad. He's like, oh.
No, he had no idea. So she's unlocking their shackles and she's trying to give them the plan. And he's like,
what? But they all are. They're like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I mean, they have exactly 1 minute and 35 seconds to get to the open air Jeep. So she doesn't have time to explain everything to you guys. Just do what I say.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like in the meat market when she's trying to tell Deck and Flynn and they're like, the Hind? And she's like, I don't have time for this.
Can you please listen?
And despite having an injured arm, Lidia ends up carrying Ruhn, just like she's been carrying this entire book.
Ugh,
kind of an ick.
I mean, yes, go Lidia, but like fucking Ruhn, come on, man. As much as I love Ruhn and I feel sorry for what's happened to him, he's essentially dead weight in this escape because he chose to have his hand chewed off instead of talking to Lidia. And now we need somebody to fight and it won't be you.
Exactly. They jump in the Jeep and Lydia's driving. Baxian's on the machine gun. Hunt's kind of sprawled in the backseat. But Ruhn is the passenger princess, just leaned against the passenger door.
He's like almost in the floor.
Yeah, she drifts down the garage like also full speed, and Baxian is like unleashing bullets on the guard station, and they burst into the city.
Ruhn begins to cry as he hears Deck's voice over the radio, letting Lidia know the cameras show 12 guards at the station they're approaching.
After they get through the barricade, a white van falls into line with them, and the door opens, and it's Tristan Flynn. And he looks at Ruhn, and his first question is, where the fuck is your hand? And you can't just ask people where their hand is. It reminded me of, you can't just ask people why they're white.
God, Karen.
So now Tristan. Ruhn is really crying, and that's not an ick. We love an emotional king. But this is like life or death, a high-speed chase. You're already the passenger princess. You already have a tiny hand, and now you're crying.
Well, like, they've all been injured and wounded, but he's the one that's the most, like...
And he is
like
touched.
The biggest baby right now.
Yeah. And to me, this was an emotional scene, not just because of Ruhn and Deck and Flynn and everything, but it was all of the sign-offs. Like, there are 11 total people radioing that their location is a go. So this is a huge operation that Lidia somehow put together undercover. You have to remember, she did all of this while, like, talking on a phone that she keeps in her tampon box. And it was all to get Ruhn out. And Ruhn's last words to her were, "You're dead to me." And she still did all of this.
I mean, it's honestly really impressive because she had a very short amount of time. She also didn't know how many people were still alive.
No.
So they had no idea if they could pull it off.
Mm-mm.
The 12th location radioed in comes from Erithis, who says she's a go to ignite the Eternal City. And if the locations sound familiar, it's because they're all along the spine, which we learned in the House of Sky and Breath is an important railway that funnels Imperial weapons.
So not only has Lidia somehow planned this distraction to get the dungeon daddies out, but she's doing it in a way that is really going to hurt the Asteri. She tells the Sprite Queen to blast it to hell, which is basically light it up.
That's major light it up.
Yeah.
And she does. She lights it the fuck up. Explosions go off around the city, providing not only a distraction, not only a blow to the Asteri, but a symbol of the rebellion not being dead.
We've talked about Ophion's numbers being depleted, but there have to be humans in Vanir out there who are sympathetic to the rebellion and to the cause, but they're scared or they don't know how to help because, I mean, it would be terrifying. I get it. It's easy to be like, oh, I would be a rebel and I would do all these things, but you have to remember how many people like
died trying.
Well, and how many people in Lunathian are just going about their daily lives, going to work, going home and watching the Fae talk shows that are just trying to like get by. And it would be hard to, if you have a family and everything, to put all of that on the line to join a rebellion.
Well, you might want to do it, but you want to make sure that like if you're going to die or something terrible is going to happen, that you are putting it towards something that'll actually succeed.
And that's why this is important.
This is really showing them it's time.
It can encourage people and rally them for any future rebellions.
Yeah. And Hunt is watching in awe. I just imagine him in the back with his mouth just flapping open because it's The only race of Vanir that universally stood with him in the rebellion were the sprites, and they're lighting the match.
An alarm starts going off, and a metal grate begins to descend that's going to seal the city. And it reminded me when I worked at, in the mall? Express. I don't know why I could not think of that. And at the end of the day, we would have that metal grate that we brought down. That's what I was picturing, but on a larger scale. Yes. There would always be people, by the way. We would be closing in, 1 minute, and I would be closing the grate, and they would put their head up under it and be like, sorry, can I just look at something? I'm like, get the fuck out of here. If you worked retail, you worked Victoria's Secret.
Yeah. And Bath and Body Works.
Wow.
I hate to brag. Christmas time. Everybody's like, just one last minute.
I hate to brag.
One last minute, get in there.
So the alarm's going off, the grate's closing, and the males are still doubting Lidia. That they keep being like, we're not going to make it. We're not going to make it.
Okay, well, help.
And exactly. She's hauling ass, and she goes under right as it slams shut, which is actually a really good thing because it's sealing all of these cars that would have been chasing them into the city.
I mean, also Baxian got real lucky because I think it knocks the gun off the back.
I know. He has to drop down.
We're all still here, which is great. Deck radios the good news. Arithis got out of the city before it was shut down.
We don't know where she went yet, but Lidia gave her instructions apparently on where to go and what to do. So her part in the story probably isn't over.
There's also some bad news. Mordok and 24 dread wolves made it out before the gate shut, and they figured out the Jeep is heading for the coast.
And they're down to one gun Lidia hands to Hunt because they lost the machine gun when they were going under the gate.
Yeah. Everyone's looking to Lidia, who tells Deck to have the ship at the planned coordinates ready to... Wait. Lydia
ready
tells Deck to have the ship at the planned coordinates to ready the hatch for an aerial landing.
Aerial landing, not sea, not land, which makes what Lidia is about to do even more of a sacrifice because she's clearly doing it knowing she's probably not going to live.
That's so sad.
But then we go from all of that excitement, explosions, there's the emotional reunions, there's a high-speed chase, and now we're back in the Autumn King's villa where Bryce is wandering around while her father is holed up in his study, and it's like the worst episode of Big Brother I've ever seen. It's
God. People are dying, Kim.
People are dying.
Can we go somewhere?
And we know this isn't random. Bryce has a goal. She's, Bryce is always scheming. She's up to something. But for all she knows, her brother and mate are currently being tortured. And she's touring her dad's house, being like, oh, wow, steam room, gym.
The movie room?
And nice. It sounds great. It's like a Faye episode of Cribs. Yeah. It sounds great, but we don't have the time right now.
I mean, she finds Ruhn's old room, and it's a museum to his rebellious youth that ended with his ordeal and retrieving of the Star Sword from Avalon.
I'm just picturing posters for Panic at the Disco and
emo
Warped Tour ticket stubs. Yeah, I love, those are the moments where I'm like, okay, I do love Ruhn because it's amazing. She opens a drawer and she finds a balm that's used by medwitches to treat burns. And it's just a reminder of the brutality of the Autumn King. It's also a reminder of where Ruhn came from and how he was able to turn into such a decent male.
All things considered, yeah.
All things
After
considered.
The way he was treated.
But that's all we get. And we're right back in the race to the ship. So I'm not even sure that was totally necessary.
I really feel like the only reason it was necessary is to show us for what comes next that Bryce poked around in Ruhn's room.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. It's that.
It's a wasted day, which doesn't feel great when everybody else is racing for their lives, but okay.
It's that, and then it's also a reminder, that Ruhn has been to Avalon and the Cave of Princes because it talks about him finding the Star Sword and his ordeal and everything. So I get it. It just, I don't know.
The timing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's never really great timing to leave a chase, but
mm-hmm.
Lidia goes off-roading until she's stopped by a thick grove of olive trees. We talked about what olive groves mean, and they represent in the Massverse and in Jewish history.
In Lydia's story to Ruhn on the Mine Bridge, the princess is shot down, and where her body fell, olive trees grow.
Olive trees have had religious significance since ancient Greece. The Mount of Olives is a 3,000-year-old Jewish cemetery with as many as 300,000 bodies, including some of the most famous historical figures in Jewish history. It's also where Jesus last prayed after accepting his betrayal.
I expected Hunt to be the Jesus because of the crown of thorns and the abs.
Abs.
And he still has a lot of time to be the Jesus of the story.
Let's not jinx it.
But you could say that Lidia is really the one making the most sacrifices.
Lydia's been making sacrifices for a while now.
For a very long time.
Yeah.
And I bet she has abs.
Oh, I'm sure she does.
So, I really thought that the olive groves and the walls and everything were pointing towards it being Antica. Like we had talked about, we know that it's not true now because we know that the Throne of Glass Fae entered, 15,000 years ago. So we're not physically where they're from. But I definitely thought that was a possibility, that we were looking at Antica.
Well, I mean, like, we know that the Fae could have modeled places after the cities that they knew from their home world.
Maybe the Fae who were planted in Antica to fight the Volg, the healers.
Yeah, the healing Fae.
It's time for a reread, which is, we're going to have to because we're deep diving it anyway. But I can't remember the specifics with all of that, with like the founding of that city. And I need to try to work out a timeline.
Yeah, the timeline is
so
many questions.
Was there a missing group of Fae in Throne of Glass that would have... Is it them, the healers?
No, I think we assumed they were killed or like something had happened to them. Like it's been such a long time, but I've forgotten exactly what the storyline is.
It just sounded very, like the castle, all of it sounded very familiar.
Yeah. And the caves underneath the Crystal Palace match the ones that are underneath the Tor Sesme too.
And the Tor Sesme, I don't know, I think this is kind of a fun little connection. It means Tower of Dawn, hence the name of the book. But in ACOTAR, the Dawn Court's High Lord, his powers are
healing.
So I think that's I love little things like that.
Nice little connection.
Yeah. And knowing that the Throne of Glass Fae came to Midgard, were there healers with them? Were there witches with them? Like the Sin Eater, maybe being the Bone Carver. I have so many questions. So I need where planes have that list,
like a manifest.
I need a manifest. Did no one write any of this down? Who came through?
Yeah, and who snuck through?
Exactly. Yeah, I took a huge turn from olive groves. I know. Sorry. I go off on these tangents whenever I hear any connection.
So it's hard to ignore them. Lidia asks Hunt and Baxine if they can fly.
Ruhn can't even wave. So Hunt and Baxine are going to have to carry him to the depth charger while Lidia buys them time with a distraction.
The distraction being herself, the bigger prize for Mordok and the Dreadwolves. So Lidia shifts into her deer form.
Yeah, speaking of connections, her deer form is gold, so gold that it's pale. And it made me think of, what's his name? The stag?
The Lord of the North?
Lord of the North.
Yeah.
I was like, Mr. Stag. I knew he had like a very proper name.
Yeah.
That he was white.
I feel like he was white.
And she has this slice of darker gold between her eyes that's kind of like a lick of flame.
Yeah, because they had flaming antlers.
He had flaming antlers, so it's just another little hint.
Yeah, it's a hint to her lineage. And we haven't even gotten to the bigger hints yet.
Yeah, we get to one that's very fucking obvious, and that's when we'll try to break down the timeline.
I don't know if we can break it down with more questions.
No promises.
We'll discuss.
Lidia nuzzles Ruhn's neck in what she probably thinks is a goodbye, and then she gallops away.
It makes me so sad because he doesn't hug her back.
Well, I know, he's hugging a deer.
Well, I mean, I hug a dog. He's just slowly processing what's happening, and it's too little too late. That's the moment when Ruhn finally is like, oh shit, I give a shit. But it's way too late.
His timing is terrible.
Yeah, Hunt and Baxine have jumped off and they've started their painful journey to the ship.
And Sarah clearly saw our debate about how you carry somebody because she says that Hunt is holding Ruhn's legs and Baxine is holding, I guess, under his shoulders. Mm-hmm. But what it doesn't answer is if they're flying, one is backwards and one is forwards, so they're carrying someone like that, or if they're both sideways. But if you fly sideways and you're flapping like this,
no,
how would it propel you to the side?
This feels very much like Deep Blue Sea when they're like, oh, sharks
can't swim backwards.
What are you supposed to do? Aside from taking your wings and scooping them back, you can't fly backwards. It doesn't work like that. But they're next to each other, then their wings are hitting. So it also, can she draw a diagram, explain? We're so visual.
We are visual people,
and I cannot put this together in a scene.
Well, and at least it gives them something to do with their hands, so they're not up there awkwardly dangling.
I mean, well, like little caveat, but this drives me nuts also, like when we're reading certain sex scenes, especially like the smutty books. And you're like, wait, how did you?
This makes no sense to
how
me.
is she doing that? Like, like they just don't explain.
Well, a lot of times it'll be like
logistically.
he lays her down and then he pulls her up and her back is to his front. And I'm like, so was she laid down on her stomach? Because if she was, you need to fucking say so.
I mean, were you in doggy style? And then his hands are doing multiple things.
Well,
like,
sometimes it'll be doggy style, but then he's like completely hunched over and like doing.
Or he's holding her against a wall. I'm like, aren't you holding her? How's your hand
your
doing
head
this?
is hitting the wall.
How did we get here? I just need.
We need pop-up books. If someone out there can make a pop-up book.
Hunt looks, or maybe one of our artist listeners, if any of you listen to us that we love, can you just like
draw the wings?
Explain.
Yeah, explain.
Hunt looks down and sees Lidia racing up a mountain with a pack of 24 dreadwolves led by Mordock on her tail.
Ruhn begs Hunt and Baxian to take him back, and it's very like Rose and Titanic. Come back, come back, come back. But they can't take on that many wolves. On a good day, they'd have trouble with that, but they've just spent 5 days in a dungeon, and Ruhn is down one hand.
They literally just got their wings back, but also now an aerial legion has flown in. It's like, they can't fight other angels. They can barely take care of themselves.
No.
I imagine that would be horrific to have to like watch her doing that and not be able to help for any of them, not just for Ruhn.
Well, he kind of didn't help the situation when he wasn't talking to her.
I mean, I don't know if this could have been avoided, but things could have gone very differently if you weren't such a bitch. But anyway.
The last Ruhn sees of Lidia, she's nearing the top of the mountain, which on the other side is just a sheer drop, hundreds of feet to the sea.
The wolves are like closing in on her.
And they're sexy. Probably. Do you picture Mordock attractive?
No, I see a brute.
And that's not attractive?
Is that a real question?
Okay. I don't know. I think
we're different.
We're different.
It doesn't work for me.
I just always, I don't know, the Autumn King, Mordock, Pollux, like what's wrong with me?
I don't know. It's the way when they describe these really brutal males, I kind of imagine like a really, I don't know. I take them back to a Neanderthal with like a big forehead and big eyebrows. I'm like, ugh.
You know what? He probably actually does look something like that.
He might. The others probably don't. We know Pollux is beautiful, even though he's crazy.
Pollux is going to be so fucking mad when he hears about all this.
Oh, God. They finally reach the ship and Captain Whatever waves them over to the hatch.
Do you think I picture guys like Forrest Gump waving? Hey!
I don't know. Literally, they're the only ones in the ocean. Like, yeah, we know. We're coming. We see you.
We see you.
You're also at the meeting point, so you're where you're supposed to be. Ruhn points out Lidia now at the top of the cliffs to Tharion and asks him to help.
And Tharion, he does step up in this moment. He jumps in and helps, but someone has to be like, Tharion, like, this is you. You need to help. But he looks up and sees Lidia and is like, oh.
There's a moment of like, wow, someone should help her. Sir, you have the water magic, and the angels clearly can't fight off the horde coming their way. Come on.
So he does jump into the water and start swimming naked
takes a minute.
Toward the cliffs because he rips off his clothes. And I mean,
take your clothes off. It's easy to forget how powerful Tharion is because he's always being either goofy or just like sad boy miserable.
Well, there's so much more she can do with that character. And as we keep reading, I do think she's setting up a much bigger storyline for him.
He takes a couple more swerves that you're like, geez, Tharion.
Yeah.
We're done. Stop. Captain Whatever finally giving main character energy.
Lungs burning, delicate hooves clopping. Oh. Juniper could never. Lydia reaches.
Juniper would never.
She would never. Where is she's just dancing somewhere?
She's back in Lunathian. We don't even ask.
Anyway, so hooves are clopping. She reaches the top of the mountain with the dreadwolves on her ass.
Including Vespasian and Gedrid, which are her favorite hunters and torturers.
And I don't think these characters or this connection matters, but I did highlight the name Vespasian because it's the name of a Roman emperor who besieged Jerusalem. There was a Jewish rebellion, and I can't remember the year. I should have written it down. But it was just another little Easter egg.
We've talked about the obvious influence that different religions, especially Judaism and mythology, have had with Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
So Lidia reaches the cliff, a 500-foot drop at her back, and the wolves are blocking her way back down.
She shifts into her human form, but I think rather than die naked, I would die as a deer.
It's a little harder to talk to people that way, but
it's hard. I mean, it's hard to be intimidating naked, but she pulls it off. Mordock asks the question that Lidia asked Sophie, the Thunderbird from House of Sky and Breath, are you faster than a bullet?
But they won't shoot to kill. They'll drag her back to the Asteri, to Pollux, and she'd rather die on the rocks than suffer that fate. She tells Mordok to go to hell and starts running for the cliff's edge and leaps.
Which I'm picturing is like that Pocahontas. Like,
yeah, we both like swan dive.
She's shot through the chest and she falls and she lets out like a bloody laugh because she assumes she's dying.
Bro, she is.
And she's probably just like, man, fuck my fucking life.
I mean, it's like you got me, but you didn't. I still won because you didn't get to me.
But before we find out if Lidia is being added to the Underking's What I Eat in a Day video, we are back in the House of Flame and Shadow where Ithan is filling Jesiba in on everything she's missed.
It's a get ready with me while I tell you about killing the Fendir heir.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got here.
Story time. How I beheaded the only hope for the wolves and need your help to bring her back.
You guessed it. Ithan is there to ask Jesiba for a necromancer to bring back Siggy.
Jesiba should just turn him into that worm.
She really should.
Why
is she even entertaining this? When Ithan says he fucked up, Jesiba, like we said, is like, did you?
Are you sure?
But he doesn't even have a moment of like, did I? He's like, yeah, I did.
He's just in such denial.
He's so aggressively entitled at times.
It's like, sir, you're like pointing out clues to yourself, but you're ignoring them.
And I mean, I'm with Jesiba here. Did you make a mistake? Ithan is an alpha, and he's the one who, because he keeps saying the wolves are following Sabine, and so someone needs to lead them to become better. But you know who did lead them? Ithan. He led them when the city was under attack to help the humans, and he's an alpha.
And they followed him.
He doesn't see himself as an option, I guess, but at least he gets a purpose in the form of a job working as Jesiba's assistant in exchange for helping him find a necromancer. So she's like, okay.
Could just use the one that you already tried to use before. But I mean,
yeah.
Anybody that's available, I'll wait. That history major finally coming in clutch, even if the job is mostly unpacking and cataloging.
And he's kind of a bitch about it. He's like stomping around and ripping shit open. It's like, these are delicate books.
For somebody that doesn't want to take the mantle of responsibility, you're very entitled, sir.
Like he's like using his claws to open boxes and then throwing things around. Jess was like, okay.
That could be thousands of years old. Can
exactly.
you calm down? Gosh. Jesiba promises to have Siggy's body transported and put on ice until the necromancer is available.
Ithan can start right away with a crate marked Lascivus. I highlighted it, but I couldn't find any meaning or connection. Like usually random names have some sort of significance, but I couldn't find anything for that. So if you know of something I don't, let us know.
Yeah.
But I do think the laptop password being Jelly Jubilee, like one word, capital J's, is cute because it's like a little...
But also Jesiba didn't change it. She's like, oh yeah, Bryce set that up.
And there have been so many clues to Jesiba caring about Bryce. Yeah. And this is just another little...
She won't be overt, but you can tell that it interests. Like Bryce kept her entertained. Speaking of, the Autumn King is finally ready to stop icing Bryce out, but she blows him off.
And what really struck me about this scene is Bryce is eating a ham and butter sandwich because that's so fucking gross. Ham and butter?
It's a weird choice.
I mean, I guess if it's like Texas toast, I'm thinking about it too much. But
if you toasted it, maybe, but I don't think that's what happened. Anyway,
I know, because she's walking up to her room with her little snack. She asks her father if he wonders what might have happened if he'd never sent his men after her and Ember, or if he hadn't tossed her to the curb after that Oracle visit when she was 13. And he thinks about it. He says he thinks about it every day. So he's not all bad. In that moment, you're like, okay.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just, what's the word? Pessimistic. Because I'm like, you think about how this could have helped you out now that you've learned otherwise. That's all.
Well, I still find it very weird that the Autumn King didn't put it together that Bryce had those powers after she blinded the Oracle. Well, that part is weird to me.
With all of his research, they should have known that there were 2 lines with Starborn power. It wasn't just one. So he should have known it was coming. But we do see a glimpse of the hurt little girl underneath all of Bryce's bravado when she answers his kings don't need to explain themselves with, yeah, but fathers do.
He's like, oh, did you need me? Because I thought you had Randall, and he's so great.
That is the only time where it's like an obvious, like, he's jelly.
Oh, but you totally have Randall.
Jelly Jubilee.
He's so jelly, Jelly Jubilee. It's clear the Autumn King has regrets, It's just not enough to be a decent male and father. So he's kind of like Ithan. He comes right up to the point and then misses it entirely.
Yeah, he wasn't going to do anything about it. He just has those feelings.
Bryce is like, okay, well, if you tell me or help me get Hunt and Ruhn out, we can talk about you becoming a better father.
Didn't you hear? They're already out of the dungeons. Because I'm a good father and didn't tell you.
Yeah.
They're not important to you, right? The Autumn King doesn't know where they are now, but he's known since that morning that they escaped and didn't say a word to Bryce.
Randall would never.
Oh my God, Randall
I'd be like,
never.
this is why Randall is better than you.
Yeah, I know. I would not be able to not use that opportunity to be a bitch. I'm like, okay, here we go.
Well, the conversation they just had, and then he just switches.
Yeah, but I'd be like, and you know what?
And I remember.
This is where we are again. Okay. For someone who seemed regretful literally 1 minute ago, he switches back into villain mode, threatening to go after Emil, a.k.a. Cooper, Bryce's new brother, if Bryce doesn't take him to Prithian.
Yeah, I don't know how he
You'd be eaten alive
out.
There, sir. What do you think?
Oh my God. Well, first of all, if
he'd prance around like, I'm the king, and they'd be like, are you?
He'd be in his like white tee and his leather jacket. I'm High King, and first of all, everyone there has more power than you. So
literally walking with like, this is my little flame. I'm the king, and Baron would be like, boom.
He walks in just like smelling like Axe body spray, which is what I imagine. They're like, okay.
Great.
But knowing him, he's just as likely to tell the Asteria about Cooper to get in good with them. It's like you can't trust him
at
because
all.
he's playing both sides. As much as you know he wants.
He does not have any true loyalty.
No, he's not loyal to the Fae. He's not loyal to his family. Like it's all ego. And it wouldn't. If he truly thinks that he has any possibility of going into Prithian as king, he's Delulu.
Bless him. Can you imagine how Reese and the others would respond if this fire crotch walked in? He's like, I'm king now. They'd be like,
I'm your king.
Watch this.
Okay.
It's not really about the Fae and their power for him, though. He's not concerned about the other Fae. It's really just about him.
Mm-hmm.
The Autumn King believes the blades can destroy the Asteria, but Bryce is like, yeah, I already tried that with Vesperus.
Did you order them to work to open a portal to nowhere?
Ooh, now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
Or nowhere, I guess.
It reminded me of something, and I can't think of what it is, but like sending someone nowhere, that's something else we've read or watched, or you know what I'm talking about? Like a void but yeah, it's.
I'll have to think on that because it is, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what I'm thinking of.
Is nowhere, is that the void? I don't think it is. Because is the void, I don't know. The void is very interesting to me.
No, the void is somewhere because that's where
Apollyon was
that's where he came from. So it's something else. I think the void is in hell.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm very interested in this nowhere. The Star Sword is made. The knife can unmake things and merge together. They can, again, how do you merge them? They can create a portal to nowhere. And he's not just speculating. He has been to the Avalon archives and seen that this is a possibility. He's read about it.
He waited so long to say something.
Yeah.
Bad news is that he doesn't know how to merge the blades, and females aren't allowed in the archives. They aren't even allowed in the Cave of Princes, which is why a female has never possessed the Star Sword.
And that's definitely a trickle down from Thea and them not wanting a female to ever rise to that level of power.
Remember we were talking about last episode? Celine was like, oh,
I don't
for all of the
be...
male heirs. Why?
Yeah.
Like, just, she clearly was raised that way.
Yeah. Yeah, she set women back.
God, it must have been from her mom, Thea.
There are a lot of obstacles. Like, there are so many things that Bryce has to figure out, but she at least has a direction now. She has an idea of where she needs to start, and it's in Avalon.
But first, she'll have to get past the mists and the misogyny.
That's the end of chapter 36, but I actually ended up having time to go through chapter 37. So if you only read through 36, like, no prob, pause it, come back here when you're done with 37. And because I just didn't want to end with, and then Bryce went to her room to pout, which is basically how this ends.
She's got to do more.
Especially because we not finally, but we find out Lydia's fate.
Yeah, Lydia
in chapter
was
37.
dying as she felt. We have to know. Ruhn wakes up in a chair in Lydia's recovery room, where he's been sleeping since being brought on board the depth charger, only taking small breaks to receive treatment for his tiny head.
Ruhn's fingers have formed again, but they're pale and weak. Because he's refusing first light. He's demanding it all be given to Lidia, which is very sweet. And she's flatlined twice, but she's alive thanks to Captain whatever. Like he did save her. But I need to talk about the tiny hand and the fingers.
Uh-huh.
Because is it a tiny hand that's getting bigger? Or is it just like growing out? Like
the
you
fact
see
that it
part of
now
it.
has fingers and it's kind of phrased
That
that
makes me
way.
think
I'm
at
like,
one
did it
point it was
grow as a
just
stump
this.
and then fingers just grew out?
Yeah. Are they
Yeah.
tiny fingers?
No. It doesn't sound like it. It sounds like they're like normal size, but they just slowly like grew out of the hand.
Oof. Flynn
I don't
is
know.
really the
Gross.
only one who was like, what the fuck?
Everybody else is like, we have bigger things, Flynn.
But at least Lydia's alive and
Yes.
Tharion did something.
He shielded her from landing on the rocks with a big plume of water, but she'd still been shot through the heart and suffered injuries to her lungs and ribs, and she has a cracked skull.
They literally had to like scoop her brains back in.
What a way to say that. Not even her vein-near healing could save her. Instead, Hunt used his lightning to jumpstart her heart.
So, if nothing else, Hunt in his time in the dungeons taught him something new he could use his lightning for.
Yeah. It's another one of those domino effect moments we've talked about in SJM books, which I guess could be attributed to Erd or fate.
Yeah, like there's so many things that have had to line up perfectly for what needed to happen down the line.
I mean, it's not just about like electricity. There's something specific with his lightning that does more than just like shoot a shock through her heart.
Yeah.
But if he hadn't heard it was possible, it wouldn't have occurred to him.
Well, and he can use it. We know he can use it for orgasms too. So now he has 2 uses.
God, such a big deal. So great.
The guilt of Ruhn's last words to Lidia, "You're dead to me," plus knowing she put everything on the line to save him, they're eating him alive. And
Good.
honestly, good. He deserves a little bit of guilt.
Good. You should be sorry. Elsewhere on the ship, Tharion and Hunt are catching up.
If you think about it, Tharion really just keeps packing up and moving his problems to like a new area code. It's like him and Ithan are passing one brain cell back and forth, so they can't both have it at the same time.
Tharion's turn right now.
Yeah, Tharion has it right now. And Hunt has added a Marc Jacobs tote bag full of trauma to his already considerable baggage.
He doesn't even have time to unpack it all right now.
No, he doesn't.
Hunt wishes Bryce was there, but I think he's romanticizing her ability for compassion and understanding when it comes to his PTSD. She's already shown him in previous books that she's not great with it.
Well, she's dismissive, and it's something we saw in Sky and Breath, but it's even worse in Flame and Shadow. And it could just be her age and her life experiences or lack of life experiences compared to what Hunt has been through. I don't know,
because she comes in and still wants to be kind of like, okay, well, feel bad for me too.
No,
okay.
You can't really compare
You've been
the
on
situations.
a cakewalk in comparison. And I mean, we have to stop bringing everything back to Rowan, but since he's our favorite, just think of how Rowan handled Aelin after Maeve.
No, is
this the same?
Exactly. I mean,
this is ridiculous.
The counterpoint would be Aelin didn't come out being as hesitant as Hunt is. And Bryce doesn't have the time and energy to convince Hunt each time that, like, we have to do this. She needs to know that he's with her 100%. But Bryce really lacks, like, emotional maturity and intelligence, I would say.
Well, she's asking a lot of him, but she's not giving the same kind of support in return. Like, in her mind, if you were to ask her, she'd be like, yeah, I'm really supportive of my mate.
Oh, exactly.
Okay, let's see you put that into use. Like, I don't. His emotional support shower is there for him more than his mate is.
Well, speaking of showers, where is the Bryce that, found him in the shower that day when he was still working for Micah and like washed his feathers and held him and took care of him? Yeah, like we'll talk about this a lot more later on in the book. But even with all of his trauma and he's missing his mate, Hunt is thinking next steps, starting with the Ocean Queen.
Well, they aren't in a place where they can just stop. Like, okay, now you're out of the dungeons, but like this doesn't mean that you're suddenly in safety either. Because you now have to talk to the Ocean Queen because you're on her good graces.
And she's a bitch.
Yeah. Nobody's perfect. The Ocean Queen is a mysterious character whose intentions and goals we don't really know. She's helped Ophion, but isn't allied with them. She's also helped Bryce, Hunt, and everyone else multiple times. But why?
Hunt needs Tharion's help contacting her, but Captain Whatever is not exactly popular. After he defected from the River Queen, like they're all kind of sneering at him.
People don't forget.
Tharion says he'll try, but right now he is scheduled for his daily pity party.
Right. We'll come back. He's busy spiraling about Ithan, Siggy, Ariadne, withdrawals, the usual.
Meanwhile, Baxian, who has lost his mate, and I think he lost part of his tattoo that, it's Danica's handwriting.
Yeah, when he was tortured.
But he is trying to, he's working out, first of all. He's already trying to build his strength back, but then he's like, what are we doing next steps to kill the Asteri?
Yeah. I mean, it's like he's been through so much emotional turmoil and he's not like full pity party. but he's also kind of at a point where he's lost everything. So it's
Yeah.
almost, it's not that it's easier, but he can kind of
You
set
can say
aside his
Tharion has too. I mean, what does he have going on?
there. Yeah.
Vaccine is living with the knowledge of what it tastes and sounds like to rip off someone's hand.
Ugh. We don't have to know that.
So if he can live with that and be like, how are we going to kill the Asteri? Tharion can stop being a little bitch.
Suck it up. Tharion learns the Ocean Queen is actually coming to the ship tomorrow and wants to meet with everyone, which should be good news, but she isn't exactly thrilled about Tharion being on board because is my sister going to go to war with me?
Exactly. There's multiple people.
What are you doing here?
I do feel bad for him because it's the River Queen and the Viper Queen who want him.
Another new thing. The Viper Queen is so pissed about what the sprites did when they left.
That wasn't even Tharion. He was already in the car.
But she's like coming after him for it, which is wild.
Meanwhile, the sprites are in the ship just watching reality TV because they're freaked out about being underwater.
Which I do understand, but they're like just hoarding. But
it's like, guys, I now have a price on my head from the Viper Queen. Like,
Thank you so much.
And that's where we'll pick up back in chapter 38 with Ithan learning who Jesiba really is, and it's very interesting.
Yes.
And Bryce finally getting to the fucking point with the Autumn King.
Finally.
And we'll definitely be covering chapters 38 through 42 next week, possibly through 43 or 44, like depending on my workload, I might be able to do another one. But like today, if you have to pause and then go back and listen or whatever. But I feel like most people are probably farther along in the book than I am anyway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're truly waiting with us to read along, that's fantastic. But I mean, I couldn't sit still. So totally understand if you have to read ahead because you got to know.
Yeah. And like I said at the beginning of the episode, I had a really good conversation with a listener via email. And before I get to her question or topic that she brought up, I want to apologize. I mean, it is apologize. I want to apologize. Her email was super nice. So it was more like I had thoughts sparked by our conversation. She was like really nice, not demanding an apology or anything or complaining. She is one of those readers who connected with or identified with some of the female characters that we've been really harsh and shitty about, like Elaine or even at times Bryce.
Sorry.
And yeah, well, I understand. Like once I read the email, and that's why she's going to be like, oh my God, you didn't have to apologize. But it did, I started thinking about it and I was like, I don't want anyone to ever feel bad listening to us, or feel
I think we also get so worked up talking about this that we becomes like a tirade and venting. And I apologize. We're not intentionally trying to not see other sides. I think it just sometimes we get on a tangent and we haven't given some of the characters enough credit. Yeah. So I apologize if anybody has been offended by things we've said. We're not trying to pick on you if you happen to associate more with somebody else. We're both very, very loud and opinionated.
We're opinionated. So we've just been talking so much shit about Ruhn, and we love Ruhn.
We do. It's very easy for us to latch on to some of the louder, more vocal characters and pick on the others. Not intentionally to be mean. It's just because we are so similar to them. So for characters like Elaine or even Sorsha, I think we're joking, but we haven't been very nice about some of those. I apologize if we've been too aggressive.
Well, if you're it's understandable if you're listening to two hillbillies make fun of a character you see yourself in. And maybe that's why we're hard on characters like Elaine, is I see a lot of things I don't like about myself in her, like being kind of a people pleaser and overly sensitive, which I am. And I mean, I also have a lot of opinions for someone. I can't even parallel park, but I read these books and I'm like, I would do this, but it's much more realistic that I would be like an Elaine,
I mean, that's probably why I was so brutal about Nesta, because I'm quick to get angry and I lay into things and I immediately regret it. But it's hard to come back and apologize after something you just did or said you shouldn't have. So,
well, I'm sure there's a bigger discussion about internalized misogyny of why we're demonizing a female character that represents traits that are historically feminine, being soft and being quiet. I'm sure there's something bigger in my subconscious about that.
I think it's also the time period we live in. Everybody's so outspoken now. But honestly, Elaine is exactly who she was raised to be. She's doing everything that she's been told to do.
Yeah.
And being in the South, we can certainly understand being raised in very conservative backgrounds, being told we have to behave a certain way.
And she
Even
has
in
a
the
lot of
21st
trauma.
century. Yeah, I think we get so pushy because we're tired of also being told to behave certain ways.
And it is like a bigger discussion in this community because there was an event, I don't know if it was Starfall, but they purposely did not hire an Elaine, and it made a lot of people upset because they were like, "That's my favorite character, and she's like a major character in this book. Like, why wouldn't you have an Elaine?" And I remember seeing some posts about that, and I was like, "Yeah, that's pretty fucked up."
Yeah, that is, I mean, if you have all the villains there, then there's really no excuse to like not have. I mean, like whether she's a big character or not. Like, and I know I pick on Lucian too because I get mad
See,
at him.
I love Lucian, and I understand like when she explained, that I identify with Elaine, so I'm kind of sensitive to that much criticism about her. I'm like that with Nesta, and I get defensive about like Lucian and some of the other characters.
But I mean, I really enjoy being able to hear those perspectives because I get mad at Nesta, and I think because I relate to her in many ways, and then you point out things, I'm like, you're right. But I mean, because like I just hadn't thought about that because I'm frustrated by a certain aspect, and we really want all of our fans and anybody that's listening to be able to enjoy listening and hear the different perspectives of the characters. I feel terrible too. We're not trying to like pick on any of you or make you feel bad about yourself because maybe you're quieter or just not as outspoken.
We all have
we
traits
shouldn't be
from
so outspoken.
all of the sisters in us. Like we
Yeah.
have a little bit of Feyre, a little bit of Nesta, a little bit of Elaine.
Well, we also want this to feel inclusive, and we want everybody to feel supported. We're not intentionally trying to like, we play off each other sometimes and we start making jokes, but we're going to work hard to be more self-aware, I guess, in the way we discuss things.
We need to be more self-aware.
We do want to be fair.
Yeah.
We want to discuss all of them. That's the whole point of the podcast.
But now to the question, because this was all in one email, and that's why I'm saying she was not looking for an apology or anything. She was just like, this is how I feel when I hear people criticizing Elaine. And I was like, oh, wow, I had not
a very
considered
valid
that.
point that we would like to hear because we do care.
But the question was about shifter claws. So when you picture the shifters and their claws coming out, because a lot of times it's just the claws, they're not fully shifted. They're humanoid, but then they have shifter claws. Are they coming out like of their fingertips, or are they coming out between their knuckles?
When you picture it, the claws being like their fingertips, like their nails just growing.
Okay, I picture it like a Wolverine situation.
Really?
Because like Tamlin's slip back, she says knuckles, but knuckles it can also be this.
But so then he has claws in his fingers.
I don't know, because he also at one point is gripping a chair and the claws go in, out, which makes me think fingertips. But then there's Ithan, who also has that dog in him. And he is punching, and then he wouldn't be punching with his fingers extended.
Right.
So how did his claws go into her throat unless it was in the knuckles? You know what I'm saying?
I just imagined like his hands, like kind of like you're going to slap somebody, like his hand was extended with his claws out to swipe, and they must have been long enough that he sliced through her throat.
That's a good point. Like it was like this.
But see, this is why we need somebody to draw this out for us, because my visual is very different than yours, but I have so many questions now. I'm like, am I right?
I know.
Maybe it is like coming out of because he still could have his little knuckles up.
Yeah. But picturing him like punching like that.
But I mean, that'd be a better like throat jab.
Yeah. So if you have like fan art that you've seen of the wolves or Tamlin shifted, we're just kind of interested in what that looks like.
Yes.
Or anything, again, like any topics you want us to talk about, or I don't know.
If there's anything else we should apologize for, let us know.
Seriously.
We've really run with a lot of conversations on this podcast before, and we might be a little bit brutal, which we do apologize. We're just rambling.
We really are. This entire thing is just us rambling.
We can go on some tangents.
But thank y'all so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
Yes.
And again, if you have any questions or anything, it's at DTFA Podcast on Instagram, and DTFA Podcast at gmail.com is the email. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.